That is the definition of indoctrination. Her sister was in my class.
Oh, really?
And my best friend at the time was in love with the woman that I ended up marrying.
Oh, okay.
When we were in high school, but like this is like a couple of years later. So it was very, very small town. Went to the same church, ended up going to the same church.
Yeah.
Like they went to one of the ones up north, but it was right by where our farm was. So it was, you're always connected to a church.
Yeah. Well, in a small town, everyone's connected. It's a difficult thing. The smaller it gets, it's virtually incestuous. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
So you come back, you've already got these thoughts in your head. You're going through them on your own because there's nobody really to talk to yet. Is she a believer when you go back and is strong, and give me the level of severity, if you will, for her belief?
Very, very, very low. I think at a level mainly of my mom and dad go to church.
Okay. Very casual.
That was, we never, I think she was kind of the same mind I was, more of this is not something I do. This is not anything that impacts my life. Mm-hmm. We didn't have a very good level of communication about things like that, but it was never anything that we brought up. We never went to church together. We never really had any conversation. Like the closest religious conversation was, my son has a Hebrew name. That's literally the closest thing I think we had to a religious conversation, was coming up with my son's name. And it wasn't even the religious aspect of it. That was it. So it was pretty much non-existent for us.
Okay.
And I don't want to speak for her level of belief or anything like that. Conversational wise, no, it wasn't even something that really came up ever. The closest thing I had was when my kids were very, very little. Mm-hmm. The grandparents wanted to take them to church. I did not want them to go. I did kind of back down a little bit, as long as it was going to church where they're there with a group just sitting there in front of the preacher, rather than going to an age appropriate Sunday school where they are specifically taught at 3 years old that Noah put things on the boat 2 by 2. Look, using the rhymes and stuff like that.
Right. Yeah.
Because that was part of what got me to begin with, and I never had a chance to question it.
Sure.
So,
did you let them go though with your mom and dad or whoever was taking them to church? The grandparents?
It's hard to say no to the grandparents. I think.
I know. We did the same thing. Totally get it.
It was sporadic. It wasn't an all the time thing.
Okay.
And the biggest thing for me is, again, listening to the Christian music in school. Carmen was a really big name, and he had one album out where he did a Western song and a rock song and a reggae song. And the reggae song was my favorite until later, looking back on it. The lines are, we must teach them while they're young, Jesus is the way.
Wow.
To our daughters and our sons, Jesus is the way. Put the words deep in their heart. Jesus is the way. So when they grow, they won't depart. Jesus is the way. That is the definition of indoctrination.
Yeah. And we'll get to other reasons why indoctrination is so prevalent in the news here in a minute. But that's exactly it. I mean, you can't say indoctrination about one group and then try to ignore it in your own group, because it is. And again, going back to what we said earlier, it's a family thing. People go to church as families, and you're obviously going to bring your baby, and that baby's going to do something. And 3 or 4 years old, they're going to play with other kids, and 7 or 8, they start to go to Sunday school or whatever the ages are. It's a very natural thing. And again, very unthought of. I mean, you're not necessarily deep thinking about this. It's just what they've always done. I did it. My parents did it. Their parents. It's just the way it is. And someone like you comes along and says, wait a second, hold up. Let's put the brakes on a bit. This is kind of funky. And I did the same thing. We didn't go to church as a family, but when my son would go across town where my mom lives, he'd go to church with her, and he enjoyed it. And I think he's definitely religious. I don't know what his level of religious is now,
Mhm.
But when I was more out, he was definitely not. Could be somewhat a bit of a, go against dad. I don't know. But it's interesting. I was like, all right, but I had no problem with it. Come to your conclusion. He certainly knows my opinion, but but let me ask you this though. Given that you're growing up, you're at least for a while, the kids were little in Alabama, right? You're in this tiny town. How did being an atheist affect you raising them internally, like in the family, behind closed doors, so to speak, and externally? Were you out? Because I was a little nervous about being out because I don't want my kid to not go to the birthday parties. And I don't want people to not come over for the slumber party because they know his dad's a weird atheist or her dad's an atheist, because in the South, that's exactly what would happen. So I was pretty tight-lipped about it until they were well into their teens. And I felt like, okay, you guys are on your own at 16, 17 anyways. There's not much I can do at this point. But when you're 6, they're babies. I got to protect them. What process did you go through on that?
I stood by quietly for the most part.
Yeah.
I was a little bit of a black sheep for the most part. And I had like layers of different reasons that I kind of didn't fit into that whole Southern rearing type of a thing to begin with. So like, by this time I was already exhibiting issues with my mental health. It's one of the reasons I was left the Navy was because of mental health issues that came from religious and other issues growing up. Yeah. And because of all of those things, I was always very quiet about things. Little things I would be really, really bold and brash and loud about. But when it came to things that directly affected me, or could possibly have down my life potential of how I would be treated, how people in my family would be treated, I was very quiet about those.